photograph. And he even got to the point when he was in the army of getting his friends to lie down and pretend they'd been shot. He then escalated still further by putting makeup on himself to make himself look dead and placing himself in front of the mirror so that he could fantasize that that was a corpse. So the murders were the final point of the escalation of this fantasy. He was, I'm afraid, completely taken with the notion of death, of corpses, of dead people, of immovability.
Nilsen's fascination with death was fed by his experiences in the army and the police force.
Des and I were called to deal with the sudden death, and on the way back he said, "Isn't it strange that none of us can actually visualise our own death?" And it was a strange statement to make.
I'm convinced that Nilsen's distorted love of death began when he was 6 years old. The only person he did have a tactile relationship with was his grandfather. One day he was asked, did he want to see his grandfather? He said, oh yes. And he was taken into the kitchen, and on the kitchen table was a long box, and then it was his grandfather lying. Nobody had prepared him for the fact that this was going to be a dead grandfather. So his understanding of love, which had been concentrated on that man, and his understanding of death, which was now concentrated on that body, fused.
The most traumatic event of my life was being carried into the room where I was born to look upon my grandfather lying dead in the coffin. I must have subconsciously wished to be in the tomb with my grandfather.
When you read material by offenders, you take a lot of it with a pinch of salt. But at the same time, that doesn't mean to say you dismiss it. I think Nilsen has understood himself quite a bit in what he's talking about, but by actually, in a way, psychologizing it, it's almost like trying to justify it and attribute a blame for it. In my experience, with a lot of offenders, when they're in prison, they are unable to carry out their crimes. And the only way that they are able to do this is by writing about them and constantly reliving them and dramatizing them. I think one of the outstanding characteristics of his drawings are the childlike quality about them. It's quite almost a symbolic presentation of how he sees himself, the unhappy little boy. So in a way he's looking for sympathy.
He's just an arrogant, selfish, cold-hearted killer. All anybody seemed to be concerned about mostly was the fact that he'd dismembered bodies and left them lying around in the flat. That was the sort of shocking thing. Nobody was really that concerned by the fact that he'd murdered and butchered all these homosexuals. But they weren't all homosexuals, they weren't all gay, they weren't all homeless, you know. These were still human lives who didn't deserve to have that happen to them. I wrote to Nilsen because I just needed answers. Mostly, why did you do this? And I got no answers from him.
Dennis Nilsen is serving his sentence at Full Sutton Prison near York. Over the last 11 years, he's written 3 volumes of an autobiography. In 2001, the prison authorities took possession of his manuscript. But there's nothing in law that says Nilsen can't publish. And in a letter to this program, he explains why he's launched a legal battle to get his manuscript back.
These works have been banned by the Home Office for populist political reasons. Everyone, it seems, is allowed to have a second-hand version of my life, while I'm denied any kind of expression of a first-hand version.
You can't simply write out Nilsen's own account and leave it at that. My book is based to some extent on Nilsen's prison journals, but I selected from them to see what matters and what doesn't. He can't do it, because it's him. He can't stand outside of himself and see himself as a killer.
Over the years, countless people have plagued me with the question why. I can only delve into the dark recesses of the past and present in search of an answer explored and provided over 3 volumes. I owe to my victims more than a retributive life sentence in a maximum security prison. Oh, then the truth, which they are free to accept or reject.
I don't think anybody would ever really find that kind of answer from any killer.
All I wanted was that he didn't haunt us for the rest of our lives, which he seems to be doing now. And this is the main bugbear of it all. The fact that he's there, the best thing he can do for me is die.
Dennis Nilsen lost his freedom 20 years ago and has since been told by successive Home Secretaries that he'll die in jail.
Come on, wait.
But from next year, it won't be up to the Home Secretary to decide whether he should be released. Instead, it will fall to a parole board to review Nilsen's case and assess the risk he still poses.
I'm convinced that one day, soon, he will be out. Like Hindley was supposed to be done. Like the Bulger murderers.
He's been sentenced to life imprisonment, and the judge recommended that he serves a minimum of 25 years. Well, in 5 years' time, he will have served that minimum. Theoretically, it's possible that he can come out in 5 years' time.
With plenty of suspects for the murder of a very unpopular man, it could be a slow process of elimination to who it is. However, a colleague of the victim is adamant that it was in fact him who did it. Is he convincing anyone? Foyle's War returns on Sunday at 8. Coming up next here, it's Night Watch.